All right, there we are. I have to mute it, otherwise it gets really echoey when I start the YouTube. It opens up a new window and then you get this crazy echo. So live and learn. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here. This is your Power Lounge. I am Amy Vaughan, the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital. We're a collaborative and diverse community of women who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. I'm excited to have you all here. If you want to learn more about Together Digital and our amazing community of uplifting, inspiring, informed, and very well-connected women, you can join the movement at www.togetherindigital.com. Today, we are discovering the untapped potential of FemTech and the transformative work ahead in female health with Ida Tin of Clue. Ida is the founder and former CEO and now chairwoman of Clue, a trusted female app with over 12 million active users in 190 countries. Pretty impressive. She coined the term FemTech in 2016 and is dedicated to providing global insights into female health. Ida has been featured in major media outlets and has spoken at many renowned conferences. Before Clue, she co-founded a motorcycle touring company and authored a travel memoir. Ida's diverse background includes attending art schools, graduating from a social entrepreneurship business school, and traveling the world on motorcycles from a very young age. She currently resides in Berlin and is working on a new book, contributing to the FemTech industry. Ida, I'm so glad to have you here and excited for our conversation today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited. If you hear crazy sounds in the background, it's just my kids playing. But
oh, we get it. We get it. It's life. And it's totally fair. That's what podcast editing is for as well. But nonetheless, that's life. So maybe we'll leave some of that in. Ida, tell us a little bit about your journey as the co-founder and former CEO of Clue. This is a world's leading female health app. Like, how did we get here, Ida?
Yeah, when I started Clue, I really started with this question: why has there been so little innovation in family planning methods? And I wanted to create something that I needed, but also something that I sense that the world might need, a type of birth control that worked with hormones rather than overriding them. I thought, what if I could take out my phone and it would tell me, today you cannot get pregnant, or today you can get pregnant. I thought that would be really empowering. So it started with this idea for a home diagnostics device. And fast forward 10 years, we got FDA clearance for being an all digital form of birth control. So along the way, we kind of ditched the actual hardware because we learned we could do the same with the data only. But that journey was a learning journey. I didn't have any special skills in technology or business management as such. I'd gone to this, as you mentioned, like a very creative business school, which was more like project management, I guess. But it started with an idea. I put a Post-it note on my wall and thought, this is something. It's going to be something, and then you learn one step at a time. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I know a lot more about the statistics within the US, but even globally, I'm sure it's even less, but just the amount of healthcare research data and statistics on women is pretty low. I know that they didn't even start including women in pharmaceutical research studies until the 90s here in the United States, for example. So having and knowing and understanding women's health, I also feel very passionate about, way back when in the day, I actually started my first year pre-med and, ended up learning a lot about the lack of information and understanding of women's health in our bodies. So when, one of our members, Juliana, who's on with us today, sent me your profile and she's like, look at this. This is like the co-founder of Clue. I'm like, we have to bring her in and talk about this because it's two very important things to us, women's health and technology. And we'll get into more of that here in a little bit. But for a second, I kind of want to touch on, because we can't pass up the background that includes leading motorcycle tours and authoring a travel memoir. How have these experiences sort of shaped and influenced your perspective in entrepreneurship and leadership? Because I think it's just such an interesting part to have within your profile and bio.
Yeah, it's true. I grew up with my kind of very adventurous parents and my older brother traveling the world on motorcycles. So I guess I had a lot of motorcycle kind of oil in my blood already. But one day I was just like, what if I didn't have a place to live? What if I didn't have all the things that kind of surround me every day, my belongings, my friends, all good stuff. But I wanted to kind of try this very radical, simplified life. So I traveled around the desert areas of the States for 2 years, and it was amazing. I mean, it was a great teacher on many levels. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly faced with these situations where you have to do something for the first time. I felt I had a new job every day, and having travel kind of gave me a good sense of like, whatever come, I'll find some way through, or I'll find some people who can support me, help me, educate me. And having sort of, I thought of it a little bit as kind of practicing or strengthening my courage muscle. If you think of courage as something you can train, being alone, traveling around on your motorcycle definitely puts you in a lot of situations where you have a good chance to practice your courage muscle a little bit. So, and also, I mean, I was in the motorcycle industry, then having this touring company as well, being, of course, a very male-dominated industry.
Yeah.
So that felt very familiar too in the tech industry. Yeah,
it's a great parallel. That makes a lot of sense. And I think when you talk about courage, it's such a great point, because it's every day. It's like a decision, right? As an entrepreneur, to get up and be brave and to do the things that need to be done to move things forward, and to think like, you kind of were like, fast forward 10 years, but really within those 10 years, so much hard work to take this little, 3x3-inch Post-it on your wall and turn it into an app that is helping to empower women, that is used by over 12 million women across the world, is like huge. Do you ever moment to stop and realize that?
No, I mean, it was probably a good thing I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I also want to say it was a team effort. I had the idea, but then very soon after found co-founders. I built a company with my ex-partner, and so many people have supported, the team, people who have worked, so hard to make this real, investors, journalists, lawyers, like so many people have helped. Yeah. So yes, I played my part, but many people did too.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a village. All right. You talking about like not having much of a tech background. I think it's safe to say that you have enough of you've got a tech background now, and you also inspired or have come up with the word and coined the term in 2016, FemTech. What inspired that? I think it's a term.
I had been invited to be on a panel for TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. They were doing their first ever panel on female health. And I was looking at the other panelists to see what they were building and how they were describing what they were building on their websites, because that was always something that I found quite challenging. And I could see that we were in the same field. We were doing neighboring things, but the language was all over. And I thought, there should be an easy way to understand that we are all part of the same really surge in technology that I saw happening. I saw all this activity. And I figured that if we had a label, it would be easier to recognize this thing happening, and it would be easier for male investors, typical, to say, I'm interested in this field, or I have done an investment in this segment, rather than having to specify some of these things that are still very challenging culturally, unfortunately, especially maybe for male investors to talk to the partnerships about. So. And then I ran around the conference and I kind of asked some of these entrepreneurs, hey, do you think it's a good idea? And would you be happy to be, classified under this label? And they're like, okay, sure. And then and then my ex-partner, Hans Raffau, he was like, we should trademark this so that nobody can in a way, steal it. And so we did, so that it could stay commons good.
That's great. That's really smart. I think that was a smart idea on his part, but I do love it because it, like you said, it gives language to something that needs and deserves language and a space so that when investors are talking, they can focus. We did talk a little bit 2 weeks back, maybe 3 weeks back now, with Cindy Gallup. Developed the app Make Love Not Porn, and
she's great
platform. She is, isn't she? And she's definitely, I feel like, somebody who falls into that category of FemTech. And she talks about how,
Sure.
really there's so many industries, verticals, whatever you want to call them, that deserve the attention of the female lens, because we're going to come at it differently. We're going to look at the world differently. We're going to hire people differently. We're going to make decisions differently. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong or better or worse. It's just different. And so being able to kind of coin that term and have that phraseology, I think, is really, really great language to have, because as you mentioned, investors, we all know that, women only get about 2% of venture capital. It's a pretty abysmal number, and it absolutely needs to change. And I know that a lot of women are working hard to figure out what that looks like and what that sounds like. And we just need some fellows to join us on that journey. And so I think having
because if I can add 2 things to that. So one thing I've seen happening now is really that the community is forming around this term as well. There are so many FemTech conferences and accelerators and hub and newsletters and blogs and people kind of really benefiting from being in this community. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that you're completely right. When women engage with something, the result comes out differently. But I really want to say, I'm all for diverse teams building for the world. Sometimes people say build by women for women, but I really, really want men to care about female health. I want us to invite them in to explain. We need their skills, we need their energy, we need their money. So all for diverse teams. Yeah.
And the ability to help educate them by having them be a part of the conversation. I feel like that's been a pretty big shift, at least in some of my relationships with male coworkers in years past. Was like, once I became more inspired and informed by women's issues and things I was seeing and, experiencing at work for myself or others, was helping to kind of, bridge that gap, that knowledge gap. Talking about the things that maybe we're not always comfortable talking about for ourselves or advocating for ourselves. So advocating for others.
And I've experienced that men very often do want to know.
Oh yeah.
And they have also many experiences that are related to female health. They might also have gone through an abortion story or a miscarriage or infertility, all these things. So I think there is a big openness for men to actually participate. And of course, also the non-binary folks out there and the trans women and men. So yeah, all of us.
Lots of perspectives to get up there, right? And to share and learn from each other. I agree. So what do you think, there's some other women's health apps out there that are kind of similar, but Clue is, again, probably by far the largest with 12 million users, as I mentioned earlier, 190 countries. What do you believe sets Clue apart from other apps in this space?
So when we started, there were a couple of other apps in the app stores, and they were very pink, and they were basically calendars that could count to 28. They were not all that helpful. And we started with the premise that it has to be really scientifically valid. It has to stand on a really robust base of science. And it has to be educational as well, because we really fast learned that it's not enough to collect data and mirror it back. You have to provide context to that data for it to really be helpful for people. And we didn't want it to be pink. We wanted to be just another part of life, natural, and we wanted to feel like, something that was not, in a way, very gendered. So these were things that were different. And then another important part was we wanted to really honor people's privacy, because we're asking for some of the most intimate health data you can imagine, or data at all that you can imagine. And it just felt so fundamental that, because it's the right thing to do in my world, but also as a business, we cannot do this if people don't trust us with their data. So we made some choices that were very sort of data privacy oriented about how we build a company. We were never going to sell the data. We're not going to build a business model on selling data. So when GDPR came into place in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulation, we were already kind of in compliance.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that some of our competitors, unfortunately, have had a couple of they have actually not treated data very respectfully, unfortunately. And I should also mention that actually two of the biggest player in the market are based out of China, and the other one is a Belarusian company. They have now kind of moved to the States, but where you store the data is a really crucial part of data privacy, and we are the ones who share who store the data in Europe and under German and under Berlin data protection officers who are probably the strictest on the planet. So that's maybe also a difference.
That makes a huge difference. I think, like you said, and when it comes to kind of bringing consumers into a space, especially when it's something along the lines of healthcare, privacy is always paramount for them, then trust. And so they're not going to come back and return to continue to use if they don't feel like it's trusted. And then I will say too, like having it had been developed in Europe and everything too. I know like the EU's consumer protection is like so much stronger even than in the US. So I would even trust it a little bit more than an app that was developed in the US, only because consumer protections are that much stronger.
No, I mean, this is a real thing. And with the political climate around reproductive health in the US, it's actually a significant thing to consider. And one of the new CEOs, she's a lawyer herself, and she's like, I'm going to go to jail before I hand out any data. And there, she has like her whole long German and European lawyer explanation of why there will never, ever be data shared out of Clue to a US governmental body. And I very much trust her. And in the, so one thing is a legal thing, but maybe even more importantly is the founder and the leadership and their take and their attitude towards data privacy. And I cannot imagine anybody better than Carrie and Audrey to protect at all costs users' data at Clue.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge tension point is in healthcare. Healthcare and technology, we've got so much that we can, learn and do. I mean, it's not even just in the sense of women's health, but overall health that we can like really help people. But it's like at the same time, there is that fine line, of data security and privacy that we have to be really careful of.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to stay on the data privacy point, but I'll just make one last point, which is I always felt that we have to not shy away from collecting data and working with data in female health because there's so much amazing stuff we can do with it, as you said. And the people who don't care about privacy, they will collect the data anyway and do all the things we don't want them to do. And then we will have lost twice, So let's do it and then do it well.
That's a great point. What are some of the other transformative things that Clue has been able to be involved in within the field of female health? Has it kind of been just reproductive health mostly?
Yes, it has. But we learned that having this very large data set on the female cycle, probably one of the biggest in the world, was really interesting to a lot of researchers. So we decided that we wanted to share some of this data, identifiable data, and very transparent with users asking for their consent. And so we've done a lot of science partnerships. And I love this idea that every time you enter a data point into Clue, you are literally moving female health science forward. So that hopefully, the science community will learn something, we learn it, then we write articles or whatever that is consumer facing, and then the loop is kind of, closed in that way. We've also done, we've done many things, but it has always been within female health and reproductive health. But actually, when I say that, I think, such a big part of our work is also cultural work. How do you create space around these things so that in culture we can talk about these things? And we did a big survey on what language people use around the globe to avoid saying the word period or menstruation. That's such creativity. So we've done stuff like that, which is kind of culturally within female health, but not directly on the sort of more biological side of things.
Yeah. Well, because again, it's another way to help empower women, because I definitely relate to that. I freelanced, gosh, ages and ages ago, for You by Kotex. So the Kotex brand, and it was early internet days, we'll just say that. And at the time, a lot of young women were basically looking for answers about their periods when their moms wouldn't talk to them, or their caretakers or grandparents, whomever was raising them, wouldn't talk about it. They would go online and search Ask Jeeves. And the answers that they would get from mostly men that were obviously pretty ill-informed and inaccurate and semi-sexual, it was just like, gosh, this is not a safe place for young women to be learning about their bodies. And I think that's another, I would definitely say that, Clue is helping to perpetuate that healthy culture of having the conversation, not just about tech and women's role in technology and women's health, but also the ability to understand and know your body and your cycle. Because I am 42 and only just learned about the different phases of my period, my cycle. Like, how did I go this long in my life not knowing? And
I
maybe
don't know.
at some point somebody explained it to me, but and
no, and you're not alone. That's really typical. So we've spent a lot of energy creating content to really educate. Probably several books if we put them together, and like female health 101. We're not learning everything we could learn at school, that's for sure.
Well, and it's so empowering, the sense of like, we had, gosh, I think it was when we were still doing the Power Lounge as She Rocks and a webinar only. We had a guest on that talked about like how to understand the phases of your cycle and how your energy actually comes and goes with that, so that you can optimize your work and life schedule as much as you possibly can. Obviously, sometimes there's enough factors that you don't have all the control in the world, but you have the knowledge to know that these are the points in the month when I'm going to be massively productive. These are the points in the month where I'm really going to need more sleep, more hydration, maybe a little more exercise. I'm going to feel a little bit more F. And it's not just the week before your period or the week of your period. Like, it was so empowering in the sense of like looking at and understanding your body in a way that helps you navigate your day to day that much better. It's really awesome.
No, that's a big thing. We built a feature at one point called Clue Connect, which is just about to come back into the product. And the idea was that you could share the high level of your data. So just basically where you're on your cycle with somebody you trust. So it could be a partner, but it could also be a sports coach or whatever, because we really do change throughout our cycle. And sometimes it's nice if people around us also know.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. And fun fact, we talked about this when we were doing our Together Digital Roadshow recently. Clara, one of my friends, is on the call with us right now. So she'll remember the conversation. We enlightened her to the fact that men have cycles, but theirs is 24 hours. So they literally go through what we go through in a whole month in a day, but somehow we're the moody ones. But their hormones
go through cycles, but they don't go through the same cycle, I would say. I think ours are... they really are more profound. Like, they change how we build muscle tissue, how our vision work, how we like to move, our social interactions. They really are profound.
Yeah, it is fascinating stuff to learn and read about and research. But that was kind of mind blowing. That can even have like, you think about hormone cycles. It's like, it's not always at 100%, right? There's ebbs and flows even for them.
Right.
So outside of funding, although we could definitely talk on that some more, in your opinion, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities for the FemTech industry today?
So, there's still much work to be done. Where is the predictive analytics for when I'm going to go into menopause? Ooh. I'm 44. I still have no idea if it's going to be next year or in 10 years. Like, how? Like, that would be nice to know. I don't have a really easy way to collect longitude hormonal data. That would be cool to know. I don't have a predictive analytics for my risk for breast cancer, given my family history or genetic testing. But I think, so there is all these things where I'd love technology to sort of go deeper, look at things at a more molecular level. And some of these sensor technologies are coming. There are people now doing biomarkers in menstrual blood, which is amazing because it's readily available. It's not invasive to get it. And you could very easily get longitude data set, right? You could see conditions, stuff that's really exciting. There's also a big issue around discoverability. So there is actually amazing technology happening out there, but most consumers have not even heard the term FemTech, and even less have they found these cool new innovations, or their doctors don't know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I'd say our data is very scattered right now as consumers. So we'd have one set of data in our running app, maybe a little bit in a period tracking app, a sleep app, but there's not a way to really make all this data work together to give us a more holistic sense of our health and our change over time. And our, I always think of it as a landscape. Like I'd love to have this map, like a landscape where I can be like, oh, if I go over that way, this is going to be my risk factors. If I choose this other way, this will happen. And this is something you could do if you had more complete data sets. I'd love to see that.
It does. It sounds amazing. I do wonder too, I feel like with that many of users and the number, having some years behind you now and that trust built, hopefully it's a good space for you to start to explore some of those more pervasive types of things with people who are up for it. Because I do think a lot of us, we want to know more about ourselves and our bodies, and we want to be able to help empower other women also know the same. And so that all sounds really awesome. Like not just thinking about looking at your health as it stands, but more of a preventative approach is pretty exciting. So I would love it to go in that direction, but I totally understand there's a lot of limitations there. How was the whole idea kind of received initially when you were going out and looking for funding and you were talking about that keyword, the period? Like, were people pretty receptive to it? Were people kind of standoffish about it? What was sort of the reception of the initial idea as you began to look for funding?
Usually a pitch meeting is like 45 minutes or an hour. And within that time span, I would usually be able, or we would, if I was pitching together with Hans or somebody else, like be able to get to a point where people would be like, oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. Kind of open up, oh, there's this whole part of women's lives that we never really thought about, And we had many meetings where we'd be like, that went really well. And they seemed really interested. And, we know our numbers are good and our vision is strong. The team, they're, checking all the boxes. And then they would say no. And you'd be like, what, why? And that happened over and over and over. And, at some point we were like, what is the hidden X? Like, what's missing? Like, we could not figure it out. And honestly, I still don't know.
Yeah.
And, we've raised a lot of money, and in some metrics or in some dimensions, I think we've been doing well and we've been lucky and it's been received really well. And from some other perspectives, like, why did we not raise much more? Why, AI is getting, billions and billions. There's nothing near that has gone into FemTech. And you're like, why not? We spend so much money on female health. We know that money would come back as societal value. And it doesn't make sense. And if you put it out to a global scale, like, it's so glaringly obvious. So I don't know what to say. It was well received and it was really hard.
Yeah. No, I think it just goes to show the resilience that we have to have when we have these ideas. Like I said, it's not just the bravery, but it's the resilience to keep going and find and searching for that yes. Because when you finally get it, you're able to build and produce something that is doing what you said it would do. And they're lost.
But I speak to many FemTech founders now who are early stage, and it's so hard. I will say it's so hard, and it's harder than it had, than I think it should be or could be. People definitely need a lot of resilience.
A lot of no's. Yeah. So on the topic again of FemTech, how do you envision the future kind of being shaped from like a health and even wellness perspective with FemTech?
I feel that we are getting used to technology solving more of our needs in life. Like, we expect to have some sort of, recommendation for great movies that we'll like, or we expect that we will have something delivered to our house. It's going to work. Like, but there were so many areas of life where we just expect tech to work. And yet when it comes to our female health journeys, there's so many places where it's like, it's clunky, go to a doctor and they're like, yeah, it hurts to be a woman. You're like, no, like, treat me. It's like all these lame stories where you're like, what's going on? So I feel that there is some sort of like agency racing where people are like, no, like take me seriously. So I think that's going to push more technology forward, and people are going to consume it more and, you know, use it and make it work for them. I'm also concerned about some part of technology and female health and where they intersect. I know that there are people working on artificial wombs, which totally and oddly scares me. And I think it's so ethically wrong. And I just
explain that to me. I'm confused by that. What is this? I have not heard of it.
This idea that why can't we build technology so that we can grow babies outside a womb?
Oh,
like total, yeah. It's like everything is wrong with that idea. I feel it completely is disempowering for women. I think it's so ethically wrong, I think, and it's like a symptom of this mindset where we fix symptoms instead of, you know, making space for this huge thing it is to create babies, if that's what people choose to do. So I think that's really problematic. I think the way that reproductive rights are being diminished is really problematic. And I feel tech can be like a good counter, like measure almost. You know, people can get support online, they can have medication shipped to them, other things that can ease their lives. But really, why are we not holding people more in these complex and hard decisions that we make throughout our health journeys? I mean, what is it that we make? What makes us think that the person herself is not the one who has the most data and the most ability to make these really difficult decisions in her life? So for me, FemTech is another part of like educating and raising people sort of ability to use their voices and be like, no, we don't want this, and we do need this, and that doesn't feel right, and, you know, form the world in a way so that it fits.
Yeah, it is a great source of advocacy, of the ability to help people advocate for themselves. And then hopefully, be motivated maybe a little bit by that fear of the fact that, like, while they're diminishing women's body rights about their own bodies, then they're turning around and saying, and then we're going to just create people without women's bodies. It's like, wow, you just like, again, it feels like another form of suppression almost.
It really, really does to me. It really does. And the worst thing about it is that I don't even think there is enough awareness to know that that's what's happening. Is you take something which is like, I'm not a religious person, but I would say sacred. Like, it's this incredible miracle that we can create life. And then to think that you can diminish this into some sort of thing that you can also then charge for. It's just so off in my worldview. And there's a lot of technology where that's why we need the diversity, right? We need to be part of deciding what we want. What world are we building? And the world really is being rebuilt right now in data. And we absolutely need, the planet needs women to take part urgently, because what is going on is not working. It's not working. We need something else. So I feel passionate about that.
No, I am right there with you. I'm right there with you, Ida. All right, I'm gonna have some nightmares tonight about artificial wombs, but let's go to the next question.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Like I said, it was made aware about this stuff, and like our chat is blowing up even with women, some who do know about it and some who had no idea. And we need to understand, know, and be educated, because like you said, these are the things we need to be informed about so that we can speak up about them, so that we can take part in helping to shape what that future looks like. Because otherwise, gosh, I think it's just, they're just trying to move on without us. Can you provide some examples on how technology and data have been harnessed to drive positive change in the female health? Let's go on a brighter side for a minute.
Yes. I mean, I'll just start with a very obvious. I think it was 2016 or 17 or somewhere around there, where I think it was New York Times who said, the year of the period instead of menstruation revolution. I mean, as soon as culture expand, you kind of after a while, it's like, yeah, of course. But 10 years ago, it really wasn't a thing in culture to ever talk about menstruation. And in our lives, it's like, yeah, it's a little inconvenient. But if you look at it globally, it's like a huge issue. People don't go to school, like all these things. And so we are moving culture with technology. I think that's a really big impact.
Mhm.
Because what happens when we expand culture is that then people can say, yeah, and by the way, you know, I'm also cramping when I have sex and it sucks. Can we work on that too? You know, I had a call with somebody working on that yesterday. So, you know, or why have we, you know, tampons have looked like this for like you know, I don't know how many years since they came out. Like, why don't we ever have sexy black ones? Or I don't know, you know, whatever. You know, or, you know, there's so many places where people are starting to ask questions and then they build stuff. Or an amazing company out of Spain who built an app for help women breastfeed.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll be like, why do people need that? But actually it takes a little bit of education to get going. What if your nipples are cracking or bleeding? And they use AI and image recognition, all these really cool technology things to help people and help the nurses train people. And so I think that's another huge thing, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever breastfed or have tried to breastfeed, you know, it's a big deal if it works. That's like your whole life for quite a while. So
oh my gosh, it was the most emotional and difficult thing. I had both my children. I was fortunate they were short deliveries, but like naturally, I would go through natural childbirth again, then go through the whole breastfeeding thing again. That was physically and emotionally and mentally harder. So I'm really glad that they have this out there. I know it's not an issue for every woman, but it is something, again, that we don't talk, like you said, we don't talk a lot about. So technology has the opportunity to empower, to educate, inform, so that when people, you know, it comes up, there's a solution to a problem, which, you know, maybe not everybody has it. Breastfeeding is
it was called LACT app. I saw the question pop up.
Okay, yeah.
LACT app, if I remember right. But also, there's a lot of focus around female pleasure and sexuality. I think that's also really great, where people can find content, education, toys, tools, therapy, like all the different things that might be needed to actually make that part of life work really well. And I think it's a really crucial one, because if you're disempowered in your bedroom, you probably have a harder time raising your voice at work too. Like, I think there is some sort of correlation, you know.
Absolutely.
So it feels like a really vulnerable and important place to start as well. Or maybe not, yeah. I don't know where to start. We need to start everywhere, but
right. Got to start somewhere. Why not there? Which, you know, brings us back to, we just talked a few minutes ago about Cindy Gallup and her Make Love Not Porn, which, you know, is kind of her approach to creating, you know, more a safer space for all gendered folks to be able to go and, you know, make, create, or watch and view porn, but it's like consensual, it's couples, it's all these different things. We talked about what was most interesting was that, you know, I think a lot of people hear about it and they kind of get a little squeamish and nervous because we're talking about sex. But what she's doing is she's destigmatizing sex. She is annihilating like this idea of rape culture in a lot of ways, because what is out there in the way of pornography is sometimes rape culture and our abuse fueled. And so, you know, helping people who've gone through trauma, and even men, she said she had like grown men calling after the first time or writing these really like sweet emails after they watched the first video, you know, just being really touched by like not ever realizing like, oh, this is what sex could actually be. Like, I always thought it was just this. Like, I've been missing my whole life and misunderstanding what this whole connection and thing is supposed to be.
Heartbreaking and touching.
Right. Very bittersweet, very bittersweet. So again, I mean, she's using her tech platform in that way to help empower people. And like you said, it has ramifications. It gives women confidence to raise their voices and show themselves in places and spaces and maybe that they didn't before. Because if, like you said, if they can do it there at home, hopefully they can, you know, raise their voice elsewhere. That's a great and interesting correlation. Let's see.
Can I add two quick points where I also think that there's a lot of like positive thing that's come out of tech in female health. One is around endometriosis and PCOS, two conditions that a lot of women have, and which traditionally has taken years and years and years to get diagnosed, which is physically painful, but also emotionally very unsatisfying, to say the least. So I feel there's a lot of awareness raising in those fields. And technology, so apps to help chronic pain, genetic testing and so on. And then also menopause, which is obviously, happening right now, where many products still feel kind of maybe like early generation products. So a lot of education was important, a lot of supplements, etc. And I think there's going to be a next leap technological to how you really get into the matter of this. That's a really good start. So these are two other important areas.
Yeah, I agree. We talk a lot about menopause around here as well. Our median age for our members is about 35. And we skew a little bit older than that for the most part as well. But it's just such a thing that we don't talk about. I think we've gotten more comfortable over the years talking about our periods and things like that, and even sexuality to a degree. But menopause, it could last up to 10 years. And it's more than just hot flashes. So we've definitely talked, and we've actually had another webinar conversation about, really kind of looking at what's happening to your body and how it impacts your life and your career and your decisions and things like that. And a lot of the women that I've talked to that are postmenopausal are like, I feel like my prepubescent self. I have more energy. I have more focus. Like, I don't have the ups and the downs. I love being postmenopausal. And so I'm optimistic. I'm like, you all make me excited for the future, because I think it used to be seen, right? It's like, you're going through the change. It's bad. You're old. You can no longer have babies. Your value as a woman is no longer existing. But that's not true. We know better than that. And a lot of women that are sharing their postmenopausal and mid-menopausal stories, I think, are really helping to empower women who are going through those changes to understand and know better and see it as more as an empowering opportunity versus something that they need to just hide and not talk about and suppress versus work through. So I agree with you. I'd love to see some technology in and around that. And if anybody does know who's listening of any, let us know. What are some of the most significant misconceptions or stigmas around female health that you aim to change and challenge through the work that you're doing at Clue?
I remember an investor who said that it was a niche thing.
50% of the population, niche? Gotcha.
No, it's not niche. I think we are also expanding our notion of FemTech being not just about reproductive health, but it's also about mental health, cardiovascular health, brain health, like lots of other things where we do have really specific patterns having female biology. So that's not really a misconception, it's just an expansion. There's a lot of basic knowledge about how our body works. How many days per cycle can you get pregnant? Which 6 is it? Maybe not everybody knows that. It's in the middle of the cycle. And then there are people who, might consider a lot of pain. They think it's normal when in fact it isn't.
Oh, yeah.
1 out of 3 women will have an abortion at some point in their lives in the US. Maybe not everybody knows that. There's so many shared experiences that are still kind of hidden.
Yeah.
That would be helpful to get out more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. You make a good point too about like the pain. Pain and pain management and women and pain, to me, is another huge gap in the healthcare industry. I think women's pain is often diminished, and women are told that, it's just life. You have to push through it, and that this is normal. But understand knowing your body well enough to say, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel normal. I think is something you've got, generations ahead. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I got excited to just add that when you look at racial differences, that gets even worse. Maternal health for Black women in the US is really not where it needs to be. But also, again, inspired by this conversation I had with this woman working with vaginal pain, she said most women who experience that, they don't even try to fix it. Like, they don't even try to look into it. They just sort of accept it. And I think that's a big misconception that we have ourselves about our own bodies. Pain definitely is a big area.
Yeah. And it's such a great point about race in general. That could be like a whole nother podcast conversation and episode. If none of you read it, I'm going to drop a book recommendation in here right now. I just finished reading it. It's not like, it's not nonfiction, but it's based on some real happenings and events. It's called Hold My Hand, or Take My Hand, Take My Hand. If any of you read the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks and her story, and just how, especially American healthcare and science, treated Black and brown bodies. There's a lot to learn and unpack there. Like I said, it could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
But that book and narrative is a great way to start to educate yourself on the reproductive rights of women of color. Yeah, I'm not gonna reveal
that
too much.
Inspires me to also give a book recommendation,
Yes.
if I may. It's a book called Rage Becomes Her.
Okay.
And it's about women's anger. And I think that's a huge under-leveraged resource that we have in society. I can highly recommend that book.
Thank you. Rage Becomes Her. Yeah. Yep. That's another great. Well,
I mean, guys, there are so many great books. Don't get me started.
Well, yes, we could go on and on about books for days, I'm sure. We have like a whole channel in our Together Digital Slack that is just books, podcasts, and articles. And like anytime someone asks me about a book recommendation, I refer them to there. And then I also give them like a whole list of whatever I'm listening to at the time. But yeah, you're also giving me more ideas for more future podcast topics.
Invisible Woman.
Anger and rage, really that's another thing for women. Very much diminished and pushed out. And again, from a racial standpoint, even more so for women of color. So, all right, go ahead. You got something else?
No, I was just going to, now that we talk about books, I have to mention it. I have also written a book, and I just signed a contract with an agent. So that's cool.
That was my next question.
Okay. Well, then I should have just gracefully waited for you to ask.
Fine. You're totally fine. Great segue. Let's go for it. Tell us about the book.
It's about FemTech and technology and leadership and social change, or systemic change, really. I also talk a lot about venture capital. It's an opinionated book. It's kind of a critical book, but hopefully also with a lot of forward kind of moving ideas about how to do things differently. And I think one of my motivations to write it was that I realized that we had done and do a lot of things quite differently at Clue. I have never worked anywhere that I didn't create myself. So I'm kind of a little bit naive when it comes to work culture and leadership. I've just kind of done it my own way. And then people are like, oh, that's kind of different. I'm like, is it? So I wanted to share some of these learnings. For instance, people that only work 4 days a week at Clue and at full salary, and that works really well.
Love it. I love it. Yeah. As a great model to have and uphold. And again, I think that's the beauty of, and that could be a whole other conversation of, for those of you who are on the fence about ever striking out on your own, as hard as it is, like you get to mold and shape like the culture, the work, the life that you want. And I think that's such an empowering thing. I think it's obviously terrifying for a lot of people, and it's a decision every day when you wake up, but I don't know. I think it's a worthwhile one. We also have an entrepreneur solopreneur channel on our Slack members. If you haven't joined it yet, even if you're on the fence, they do a peer group monthly and a mastermind monthly. And it's been really inspiring to see, especially over the pandemic. A lot of women are feeling as if the places that they're working aren't showing up for them, either from a cultural standpoint or supportive standpoint, work-life balance standpoint, because we never went back to normal. We have this whole new normal, which is a lot more, and we're all still adjusting to so much. So a lot of women are just kind of getting fed up and leaving, or as their employers like to say, quiet quitting. Or women are disproportionately getting laid off from tech. I had a stat recently that showed that women are 68% more likely to get laid off in tech than men. So we already exist in such a small number in that space that I love that you're building, establishing, and now writing a book, and hopefully encouraging and inspiring more women to get out there and build their own piece of FemTech.
I hope so.
All right. It looks like we've got a couple questions from our live listening audience. Oh, wait, what's the title of the book, and is it out yet?
It's not out yet. So far it's just called FemTech, but that might change.
Okay. Well,
I'm open for good ideas.
Yes, you're going to have to let us know when it's ready, because maybe we'll do it as a book club read as a group. That would be fun. Cool. All right. Lara wants to know, I work with a client involved with menses in Africa. I've often wondered if there was a way to develop a very cheap tracker to distribute to girls in Africa so that they can avoid early pregnancies. Any ideas on that?
Yes, we actually went and did quite a bit of research in South Africa years ago, because I would love to do that too. And what I came back with was kind of what I already knew, but being really humbled. It's a different market. The product needs to look different. The business model is different. The marketing is different. The distribution, everything is different. It's basically building a new product, a new company. I think it's absolutely possible. And you would have to approach it the same way you would here. You go speak to a ton of users, you would build some early prototypes, you test them, you get feedback. You are there, you are into the matter, you work with people who live this culture, and you understand what all the cultural barriers might be. Maybe they don't have access to their own phone, maybe they're sharing it, etc., etc. But I would say one of the reasons why I wanted to build a new form of birth control was that I thought, well, there are 200 million people on the planet who don't have access to birth control, but they have smartphones. And I still have this sort of idea that what we've built could be really helpful globally. It's still to be proven.
Isn't that telling though? We have more access to phones than birth control. That's telling you something right there. All right. There's another question from our group. Thank you, Clara. Oh, by the way, I'm going to do a little bit of networking. I feel like maybe you and Clara should connect, Ida, or I can connect you two offline so that you can talk. Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of partner and have Clue work with her client and Clara to see if there's like something you can do together even. Yeah. We've got another question. As I said, I assume that there's a lot of startups in the female tech space or FemTech space. How can we drive the established firms, corporations to do more in this space?
My sense is that the big players in female health are waking up a little bit, and some of the big corporates. How to answer this shortly? My impression is that a lot of the big corporates, they don't really do all that much innovation. They really buy in or they invest into companies that fit their strategic roadmap. So if you as a startup want to have these kind of conversations, that's one way to engage. But maybe you don't want to be bought by a big corporate, in which case it's a little more challenging. We've had a lot of conversations with corporates that has gone really far. Then at the very end, it's like, we don't really want to be building on their strategic roadmap. We want to be on our own, and it never really panned out. But this is where what you are doing, Amy, matters, right? It's like raising the awareness, raising the expectations, like, hey, pill company, why are you still, not doing X, Y, and Z, or why are you doing X, Y, and Z? That's how they change, how they get engaged. I don't have a more specific answer.
That's okay. That's a tough question. I think if we had the answer, things would look a lot different. That number would be more than 2%. And there would be more femtech companies out there in the world. I don't know. Do you feel like it's oversaturated, or that there's a lot in the space, or do you think it's
No, I don't think it's saturated at all.
There's room, ladies.
Those $22 billion invested into femtech in 22, if I remember the number right. Some maybe it's 20, like somewhere in that realm, which is, up significantly from just, 5 years ago, it was 600 million. So it's really going up, and it's for sure not saturated. And also, you have these first, there's a lot of small companies, and then there's some sort of market consolidation. And then, it's like, we're still so early. It's like, and then later it'll be like more. So
now's the time.
We've just begun.
Yeah. So on that note, I'll ask the final question then. So, to any woman out there who is considering, building her own platform of some sort of femtech in the healthcare or any space otherwise, what would be your parting advice and encouraging advice to her?
To start.
I've
spoken to so many women, and they kind of list all the internal reasons why they're not quite ready to start. They don't have enough data or information or partnerships or co-founders or whatever it is. It's like, you just need to start.
Yeah.
Just need to start.
Yeah. I feel like that's the case a lot of times, right? It's not even the lack of ideas. I feel like there's a lot of women out there who have a lot of good ideas, because I think that's the other thing too I loved about Clue is like you've been focused all this time on solving a specific problem. And it's not about being in love with like that product necessarily. It's always improving the product to help meet the consumer where they are and with what they need, but still trying to solve. Like you start when you talk about Clue with the problem you're trying to solve. So I think that's tremendous and admirable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Go find the really hard and big problems to solve. The harder, the bigger, the more people want to help you.
Right? Yeah. The more
Yes.
interesting it'll be as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well,
and it's not harder or easier to build a company doing like a small idea. Choose a big idea.
Yes. The bigger, the scarier, the better, right?
I think so.
Wonderful. Well, this was amazing, Ida. Thank you so much for the work that you and your team have been doing. I hope you all check out Clue if you haven't been using it yet. It's been great having you here in the Power Lounge with us, and we look forward to seeing more from you about FemTech and your book. And I around in the
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who showed up.
Of course. Everyone, have a great rest of your Friday. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.